You've been called an introvert. Maybe because you leave the room early, maybe because you'd rather read than socialize, or perhaps because crowds don't energize you, they simply exhaust you. And for a while, that label made sense. It gave shape to your quietness. It explained your exhaustion and your tendencies for solitude. But what if that word, the one you've trusted to describe yourself, has been misleading you this entire time? What if it's actually disguising what you really are? Carl Jung, the renowned psychologist who first defined introversion, wasn't talking about shyness. He wasn't describing behavior at all. He was naming something much deeper, the direction of your consciousness, the fundamental architecture of your mind, the very flow of energy within this sacred structure. And what he truly meant by introversion has almost nothing to do with what you've been told it means. In this video, we're going to unpack some of the most common misconceptions about introversion, reveal what Jung actually taught, and give you a clearer key for understanding both yourself and whether this deeper architecture of introverted energy truly applies to you once you see it more clearly. Let's start with the first major misconception, the idea that introversion equals shyness. This belief has shaped public understanding for decades. But in Jung's framework, introversion isn't about being quiet. It's not about being socially anxious, withdrawn, or overwhelmed by people. Those are just behaviors, surface-level manifestations that can show up in anyone. Introversion, as Jung defined it, is about where your psychic energy flows. An extrovert's energy is directed outward, toward objects, actions, conversations, and events. But for the introvert, that energy flows inward, toward reflection, impressions, memory, meaning, and symbolic perception. It's not that introverts necessarily avoid people. It's that they process the world from the inside out. Jung himself wrote, "The introvert's life is governed by subjective factors. The decisive factor is always inside." This isn't a personality style. It's a cognitive orientation. So what you've been calling introversion might not be a social tendency at all. It might be the visible symptom of a much deeper structure, one you've never been taught to name. The second misunderstanding goes even deeper. It's the idea that introvert is a complete personality type. You've been taught to treat it like a stable identity. I'm an introvert. As if that alone explains your cognition, your needs, your inner workings. But in Jungian typology, which later became the foundation of the MBTI, there's no such thing as an introvert in isolation. Instead, Jung identified specific mental processes, thinking, feeling, intuition, and sensing. And each of those can be introverted or extraverted. The way these functions are oriented is what shapes your personality, not how outgoing or reserved you are. So when MBTI types you as an I, like INFJ, ISTP, or INFP, it simply means that your dominant function is introverted, not that your whole being is turned inward, not that you hate people, just that your primary way of interpreting reality begins inside. Now that we've separated the label from the truth, let's look at what actually defines a personality type in Jung's model. To go deeper, every MBTI type is a configuration of 4 main functions, typically 2 introverted and 2 extraverted. But one of these is dominant, and its direction determines whether you are classified with an I, introvert, or an E, extrovert. What most people never learn is that you still use both directions. They think introvert means everything is inward. But in truth, it simply means your primary operating system begins inside, while your other functions engage the outer world in a complementary flow, one that often moves in a spiral between inner reflection and outer expression. If you're an INFJ, your dominant function is introverted intuition, NI. Your mind draws inward to synthesize unseen patterns and anticipate meaning. If you're an INTP, Your dominant function is introverted thinking, TI. You refine truth internally, endlessly testing logical coherence before acting. If you're an ISFP, you lead with introverted feeling, Phi. You know what's right not because someone told you, but because it burns quietly within. If you're an ISTJ, your dominant is introverted sensing, Psi. You orient through memory, precision, and internal consistency. These aren't just traits. These are internal mechanisms of consciousness. Each type, despite its outward behavior, functions according to which introverted process runs first. The contrast becomes even clearer when you look at what happens when these same mental processes face outward. Take thinking, for example. Introverted thinking, TI, refines truth internally, building precise mental frameworks. But when thinking is directed outward, as extraverted thinking, TE, it organizes the external world, systems, structures, outcomes. It moves quickly and publicly. Or consider feeling. Introverted feeling, Phi, forms personal values privately and independently. But when feeling faces outward, as extraverted feeling, Phi, it tunes into social context and emotional harmony. It reads the room, adapts, and seeks connection. Now look at intuition. Introverted intuition, Ni, synthesizes meaning inwardly, tracking patterns beneath the surface, predicting outcomes. But extroverted intuition, Ni, looks outward, exploring new possibilities, generating ideas, constantly seeking the next emerging connection. And finally, sensing. Introverted sensing, Psi, preserves detailed memory and internal impressions, anchoring the present in past experience. But extroverted sensing, SE, engages directly with the external world, absorbing sensory detail in real time, responding with immediacy and precision. So the same core function, thinking, feeling, intuition, or sensing, becomes an entirely different experience depending on whether it's oriented inward or outward. That's what Jung taught. That's what MBTI was designed to track, not just how you behave, but how you process the world beneath that behavior. And if you'd like to go deeper into how these functions actually shape MBTI types, and why the test itself often hides this truth, I've made a full video on it. I'll leave the link to that video, The Hidden Truth Behind MBTI Personality Test, in the first comment below. And this is why so many have been misnamed. If you've carried the label introvert your whole life, it may not have been a mistake, but it was incomplete. You weren't being shy, you were being internal. You weren't avoiding others, you were orienting differently. You weren't broken, you were simply structured for reflection in a world obsessed with projection. That is not a flaw, that is a function. And when you stop trying to conform to an extroverted rhythm, when you begin to understand the architecture of your own dominant function, something shifts. You stop apologizing for how you process. You stop mimicking what drains you. You begin to move from your center, not from the pressure to adapt. And that is where alignment begins, not as a lifestyle trend, not as a self-concept, but as a return to your design, to the sacred pattern that was there before anyone taught you to mistrust it. So if you've called yourself an introvert your whole life, perhaps that word served a purpose. Maybe it gave you language when you had none, a shield when you felt unseen, a frame to hold the parts of you the world could not understand. But now, it may be time to let that word fall away, not because it was wrong, but because it was incomplete. And if, through this clearer lens, you begin to see that this deeper architecture of introverted energy truly does apply to you, then understand this. You were never just escaping noise. You were organizing signal. You were never avoiding others. You were navigating from an inward compass, a sacred architecture of perception that was always there beneath the surface. You were not defective. You were designed. But if this exploration revealed that your mind orients differently, that your flow is not primarily inward, then you've still gained something vital. A map. A deeper understanding of the true structure behind personality, one that reaches beyond labels and static categories. If your dominant function is introverted intuition, the video on the 7 signs you're intuitive will feel like a homecoming. It's designed for minds like yours, quietly synthesizing, relentlessly patterning, seeing what hasn't been said yet. And even if your dominant function is introverted feeling or introverted thinking, that video will still echo through your inner world, especially if intuition supports your stack in the auxiliary or tertiary position. Because the functions do not isolate us, they collaborate, and they spiral. So if this video named something in you, something you've always carried but never fully understood, subscribe, not for content, not for performance, but to walk the map. Because whether this path led you inward or pointed you outward, you now hold a deeper key. And that is the beginning of clarity.